Okay, in this video here, we're going to finish up this section P5 on factoring, and it's no new stuff. We're just going to do a little practice from the stuff we saw at the end of the day 2 video, and I just made a couple worksheets. This video here, we're going to go over worksheet A, call that practice, and then worksheet B, you're on your own. It's similar types of problems, that is, for the homework. Let's get started here. This is number 1 on worksheet A, x to the 9th, 7x to the 6th, minus 5x to the 4th, plus 2x cubed. And the direction just says factor out the lowest power of x. So my coefficients, remember there's an implied 1 here. If I look at all the coefficients, I see prime numbers. No numbers are going to factor out. So this first one is going to be a nice easy one. We're just going to factor out the lowest of the powers, and this is in descending order, so we're going to factor out an x cubed. So let's figure out what's left in here. We can either subtract 9 minus 3 would be x to the 6th, plus 7x, 6 minus 3 is 3, minus 5x, 4 minus 3 is 1. And then we've got a plus. Remember, we factored this out in its entirety, so there would be a placeholder 1 there, but we also got a 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and there we go. Again, we can always distribute to make sure we get back to where the problem all started. Remember, when we distribute here, we're adding exponents. 3 plus 6 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6, 3 plus 1 is 4, and then remember, there would be an x to the 0 here, you could say, because anything to the 0 power is 1. 3 plus 0 is 3. Nice easy one to get everything started here. Now this next one, it's pretty similar, but I've just changed some of the exponents, and now we've got a negative exponent in there. Once again, our coefficients are all different. There's an implied 1 there, so no coefficients are going to come out, but we will factor out an x to the negative 2. Remember here, when we're subtracting, 7 minus a negative, we'll turn that to a plus, so this will be 7 plus 2 is 9. Plus 8x, 4 minus a negative 2 turns that to a plus, and we add up to get a 6. Minus 3x, 1 minus negative 2, turn that into a 3. Plus, remember, this is what we factored out in front in its entirety, so we're just going to be stripped down there to the 2. Again, we could check by distribution. Negative 2 plus 9 is 7. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Negative 2, yep. And then we distribute there, and it would be x to the negative 2. So a little more trick. Ooh, here we go. We've got some fractions. We do see a 2 in there. Don't let that throw you. And here everything is positive. Now just for my own sanity, I'm going to rewrite everything is in halves. 5 halves, 3 halves, 1 halves. How could I rewrite 2 as halves? Well, that would be 4 halves. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So here it's just easier to see everything is now in the form of a fraction. Coefficients are all different, no common factors, so once again we cannot pull out a coefficient, but we can factor out base x to the lowest exponent, and that's going to be to the half power. So we are going to have an x in here. That's our base. What's our new exponent going to be? Well, subtract. 5 halves minus 1 halves is 4 halves, and we'll clean that up in the next step. Plus 2 base x, 4 halves minus 1 halves is 3 halves, minus 4 base x, 3 halves minus 1 halves would be 2 halves, plus, and here again we have a 5, and we factored out the x to the half in its entirety. So just one more line here to rewrite it, make it look pretty. X to the half times, oops, get out of there, x to the 4 divided by 2, well, that's just 2x squared, plus 2x to the 3 halves, minus 4x, 2 halves. We can just rewrite that as 1, leave it as an implied exponent, plus 5. So there we go. Now again, all fractional exponents, but they were all positive. Number 4, fractional exponents, but now the smallest one is negative. So let's see, first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this so everything's in terms of halves. 3x 5, that's 10 halves, plus x to the 7 halves, minus 7x to the 2 halves plus x to the negative half. So we're going to put a set of red brackets around there, and we can factor out in front of those brackets our smallest exponent, x to the negative a half. So here we're still going to have a 3 base x, but now we subtract, and don't forget that minus. We are minusing a negative, so this is going to be 10 halves plus a half. That's 11 halves. Plus base x, 7 halves minus a negative a half. That'll turn into 8 halves. We'll clean that up in a minute. Minus 7 base x, 2 halves plus 1 half is 3 halves. And then here we factored this out, remember, in its entirety, so that will be a plus 1. So I'm going to just work my way back up here. So let's just make it look a little nice. We've got x to the negative a half, and then 3x to the 11 halves. That'll stay like that. Plus x, 8 divided by 2 is 4, minus 7x to the 3 halves, plus 1, and then close those back off. All right. All base x again, but here we had a negative fractional exponents. Now I believe the rest of the worksheet we're going to do some stuff in the quantities, the stuff in the parenthesis there. So it's all x minus. Get back there. It's all x minus 4 quantities, but to different exponents. So just keep track of this. I'll keep my brackets red. So here's my red brackets, and we can factor out, since these are all the same base, we can factor one of them out, the x minus 4 quantity, to the lowest of the exponents. That'll be first power. So if we're working here, just inside the red brackets, we will have an x minus 4 quantity, but now we need a new exponent. Either 1 plus something will take us to 4, or 4 minus 1 is 3. Plus, we have another x minus 4 quantity, but this new power is 2, minus 1 is 1. And then we have minus. We factored this quantity out front in its entirety, so there will be a 1 as a placeholder. Okay, now here we can see this is going to make our final answer a lot nicer. I'm going to leave the x minus 4 quantity cubed. Foiling that out would just make everything more complicated. But here, this quantity to the first power, we can ignore the parenthesis. So this becomes x minus 4 minus another 1 more. So we can just make that, don't forget my plus there, x minus 5. And close off the brackets. Number 6, similar, all quantities, x plus 7, but to different exponents. But in this case now we do have a negative exponent in there. So if I switch back to red for my brackets, we are going to factor out in front of the red brackets our base of x plus 7. To the lowest of the exponents, that'll be negative 2. So our first term is still base x plus 7, but our new exponent is 3 minus negative 2. 3 minus a negative turns into a positive, so that becomes fifth power. This middle term is still base x plus 7, but our exponent is 2 minus a negative 2, so that'll turn into a positive 4. Minus, here again we factored this out in its entirety, but we do need a placeholder 1. And, we could fifth power, sort of foil that out and collect terms, but our answer would be more complicated at the finish. So let's just leave it like that. Number 7, quantities for our bases. We've got some fractional exponents, but they're all positive. And let's turn this 2 into a 4 halves. So now they're all half powers. Here's my brackets. So out in front of those brackets, we will pull out an x minus 1 quantity. Our smallest exponent is a half. Inside the red brackets, first term x minus 1 base, 5 halves minus 1 half is 4 halves. So let's just write that as a 2. Plus base x minus 1 quantity, 4 halves minus 1 halves is 3 halves. That's a terrible, get back there. There we go, that's a little nicer. minus, we did factor this term out in its entirety, so there's just a placeholder 1 there. And none of our inside exponents here are first power, so we can't drop the parenthesis and combine anything else. We'll leave it just like this. Here's our last one. Yeah, last slide. Base is quantity x plus 2, but we now have a negative fractional exponent. And this first power here, let's just make that 2 halves. 2 halves. I'll keep my brackets red. And we will pull outside the brackets our base, x plus 2, of the lowest of the exponents. In this case, that's the negative 1/2. So inside, we have base x plus 2, and our exponent will be 3 halves minus a negative 1/2. That'll turn to a plus. 3 halves plus 1/2 is 4 halves, or 2. Plus base x plus 2 quantity. 2 halves minus a negative 1/2. So we add that and get 3 halves. And then minus, we've factored this out entirely, so that's just a minus 1 at the end. And there's our final one, number 8. Again, that is worksheet A is practice, that you've gone through the mechanics. Worksheet B will be homework. That will be somewhere on my teacher webpage, or maybe you got a copy of it in class. I'll see you in the next video.